I'll take some questions from my friends, so I'll let Sabuton go first. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions on four different social topics on sex work, on trans rights, on LGBTQ rights in general, and reproductive rights,
Sure.
if time allows us, that is.
I will
So,
try to keep my answers briefer than the previous ones.
okay,
Oh,
so
that's fine. You can go as long as you want, Matt. It's all yours.
let me start off with sex work. So, a frequent objection that is raised by abolitionists against consensual sex work is that if sex work is decriminalized or destigmatized, then most women in any given country would become sex workers. Like that's an actual claim abolitionists say. They also say that women shouldn't consent to become sex workers. Instead, women should consent to become doctors and scientists. They say that feminism and secular humanism should be focused on turning as many women into doctors and not encourage them to become sex workers. I'm curious as to how you'd respond to this particular abolitionist claim.
Sure. As succinctly as possible, we have information on areas where sex work is legal, and not every woman does it just because it's legal. So that argument is dismissed its face. Second of all, everything that you just said, and I realize you're standing in for them, approaches sex work as if it's all about women doing the sex work. Men do sex work too. Sex work is real work. And most of the problems with it, not all of the problems, but most of the problems with it are fixed by making it legal, regulated, and allowing to make sure that people aren't being trafficked, to make sure that people aren't being forced into it or taken advantage of. I have known, been married to, lived with, dated many sex workers, and that is not a sample size that's big enough to counter anything that those people said. But I would imagine that most of them don't have a sample size that large either, because we have disparaged sex work in most cultures in modern history to the point where you can't get good information on a lot of this stuff. And so if they have fears and concerns about what people are doing, then the correct solution in my mind is to regulate those things and offer protections. The reason why there's trafficking, the reason why there are people who are in danger from sex work is because they are operating outside the law. And when you operate outside the law, you lose the protections of the law. Now, it's going to be different in different countries. And I'll be the first to admit that everything that I say should only be taken as specifically aligned to my experience in the United States. I think that these things would apply globally, but we may have to change a number of other things about, for example, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Islam, Iran, with regard to how cultures perceive those things there, in order to, if you just made it legal, but you let people terrorize other people, I don't think you've solved any problem. And so please don't
That
pretend.
actually ties into my next question. Do you think that feminism and secular humanism should be concerned about the destigmatization of sex work?
Absolutely. I mean, I as a humanist and a feminist. So the problem is if you ask feminists about pornography or sex work, you will get two dramatically different answers. There will be some feminists who want to ban it, and they will cite the trafficking and abuse and all these other things. And there'll be other feminists that want it legalized and regulated, and they will cite the success that it's had in empowering women. It's one of the areas where, the women in porn are going to get paid more than the men in porn largely. Now that we've got everybody doing porn and porn being available for free, that has diminished that power imbalance somewhat. But what it means is that it has also diminished trafficking, not eliminated. None of this is, all the problems that people point to, they're not going to be solved merely by legalizing, but they are amplified by keeping people outside the law because they're outside the protections of it.
My next question about sex work is, do you think that consenting to sex work lessens a person's dignity?
No. I've
Okay, perfect.
consented to sex work. I'm living with someone who does sex work for a living. I've done that 3 or 4 times. Um, it doesn't diminish anybody's dignity. The thing is, that is a job that not everyone is suited for. Depending on someone's upbringing and baggage, depending on how they feel about themselves, whether this is about empowerment, or whether it's a necessity to keep the lights on and feed your family. It puts people in the job for different reasons. Um, Not everybody is suited to that job, and so it will impact people in different ways. And in some people, it will impact their dignity, but it's not necessarily the job that is doing that. It is all of the other things around there. Just like when someone says um, they're homosexual and they're ashamed of it. It's not the homosexuality that's making someone ashamed of it. It is the religious doctrine that says you should be ashamed of that, or whatever other societal impact is saying, oh, this means you're bad, and you've bought into that. There's nothing about being gay or trans or anything else that diminishes your dignity. That only happens in conjunction with an idea that this is wrong or evil or immoral.
My last question about sex work before I move on to trans issues. Do you think consenting to provide a sexual service in exchange for money is equal to selling your body? And do you think that it is stigmatizing to equate sex work with selling your body?
It's not selling your body. It's any more than it's renting access to a service. But no, it's not selling your body, and suggesting that it is potentially stigmatizing. It's hard to say what is or isn't stigmatizing, because most of the people I know who have done sex work, they already don't look at it as selling your body. And most of them, when someone says, oh, you're selling your body, just give that an eye roll, because they already know the reality. They haven't sold their body to anybody. This isn't a rights issue. That's what happens when there's human trafficking, when somebody else has control over somebody else. Provided you begin with a foundation of individual bodily autonomy and sovereignty, which applies across the board, there's no selling going on. You're not even selling a part of your body. You're not selling a kidney or anything else. You're just saying, hey, I will provide this service for you. And that service could be anything from, I'm going to sit here next to you and give you someone to talk to, which is quite frankly one of the biggest aspects of sex work that people don't talk about. You go into a strip club in the United States, quite often it's considered, oh, I'm going to sit here and do kind of naked therapy. It's not a sex thing as much as it is a social thing. And so what could be sex work could be, I'm going to give you someone to talk to. I'm going to give you someone to empathize with you, someone to care for, someone to show off, someone to elevate your status. The sex part of it is often secondary, and that tends to be largely in private, unless you're, like at a sex club. And so that's not diminishing anybody. That's what two people, or more than two people in some cases, are doing in private.
Right. Okay.